if you have...
So, the Fraternal Order of Police has
endorsed a Democrat for the President of these United States for the first time in its history. I understand that the police and the Republicans have not been getting on lately, since the Republicans have adopted the NRA's position that everyone should have an automatic weapon with cop-killer bullets. You might have thought that the Fraternal Order of Police, or FOP, would have given up on the Republicans, as most Americans have, many years ago. But it took the FOP some time to reach this conclusion on its own, and significant contradictions in their positions remain. To my way of thinking, the FOP still treats its members as expendable items, sacrificed according to political whim or corporate need. The point here is that just because some big organization claims to represent the interests of a group of working people does not mean that it actually does. For example, what is the FOP's position on the so-called war on drugs? They're for it. The FOP thinks a war on drugs is the greatest thing since sliced bread. And in whose interest is the so-called war on drugs? Well, we now know that the original source of crack cocaine in the inner cities in America was the CIA, thanks to an informative and extensively documented series of articles 2 months ago in the San Jose Mercury News. We also know that the CIA started its drug habit by selling opium and heroin to finance its wars against democracy and humanity in Southeast Asia in the 1960s and 1970s. We know that the CIA sold heroin in the 1970s and 1980s to finance its war against people and self-determination in Afghanistan, and then cocaine and crack to finance its wars against decency and justice in Latin America. We also know that when the CIA is involved with operations domestically, such as selling drugs, that local police departments and even the DEA are helpless to stop them. Usually, the police are powerless to even arrest the key people involved, let alone stop the flow of drugs. Thus it seems that the number one source of dangerous drugs in America is the CIA, and the police are powerless to do anything about it. We also know that criminalizing drugs or alcohol, in addition to increasing profits, generates a culture of crime and violence, of which local police officers are among the victims. So why is it that the FOP supports continuing the so-called war on drugs? It can't be because they want to stop the flow of drugs into our cities, because their involvement is irrelevant to that issue. It can't be to protect their members, because in the end it is Fraternal Order of Police members who end up among the dead. Politicians and the leadership of the FOP can go on TV and express outrage that police officers are killed by 13-year-olds with MAC-10s. That makes for great sound bites. But how is it that 13-year-olds came to need, let alone afford, MAC-10 machine pistols? The CIA. My point being that CIA drug sales over the decades have created situations in which 13-year-olds not only can afford machine pistols, but actually believe that they need them as well. If we're serious about cutting drug use and violence in this country, then 2 courses of action are called for. First, we must eliminate the CIA, the largest drug-pushing operation on the face of the earth. And second, we must decriminalize drugs, replacing crime and violence with treatment and human compassion. The most critical flaw in our democratic ideal is this persistent fog of denial in which we live. Drug pushing by the CIA is not new, nor are other abuses of human dignity and human rights. Yet we persist in pretending that if we hold just one more set of congressional hearings, the problem will go away. It's not the agency, but rogue elements in the agency which are to blame, or so we're instructed to believe. Enough is enough. It is the agency that's the problem, and the rogue elements are those who resist the culture of destruction and violence at the CIA and leak the truth. How many more children must die? How many more hundreds of thousands of lives must be destroyed before we find the resolve to act? And how many more police officers must die needlessly before the Fraternal Order of Police decides to end its support for the slaughter of the innocents, the so-called war on drugs? This is Richard Curtis.